So welcome to this Castlegate virtual tour. Here we are in the inner basin of the Victoria Quays, Sheffield Canal Basin, and we're standing next to the Terminal Warehouse that we're going to be exploring in the tour, and in the background the grain warehouse. The Terminal Warehouse was built in 1819, that's when the canal arrived in Sheffield, and it's hard to underestimate what a big event it was. It was like the motorway of its era. You could get the loads of 50 different horses onto one Humber keel, the kind of boats that these warehouses were built for, 60 foot long, 15 foot wide. So it revolutionised transport and industry and connectivity of Sheffield with the outside world. And this warehouse was where all those boats were heading for. Sheffield Canal had a fairly brief era of prosperity because it was a late canal. By the 1830s, another technological revolution had happened. The railways arrived in Sheffield, and within 10 years they were competing with the canal, and eventually they took the canal over, and the railway company ran the canal for the next 70 years, and they ran it as a poor relative, and that really annoyed the local industrialists and the council, and they petitioned eventually to have the canal taken out of the control of the railway company, and a new company was set up, the South Yorkshire Navigation Company, in the 1890s, and they built this warehouse behind here as part of a big expansion of the facilities in the canal, and also the straddle warehouse, which, as the name implies, straddles the canal, and that was another boost for canal traffic for another 20 or 30 years. The First World War was what really finished the canal off as a viable commercial enterprise. All the horses were taken into the army, as you probably know from the film War Horse, and most of them didn't come back, and a lot of the trade didn't come back after the First World War. So there was a long, slow decline of the canal from the end of the First World War up to 1970, when the last commercial load arrived in this warehouse. And then for about 10 years it was a bit of a twilight area, boat yards and various nefarious activities, before the council, the British Waterways, started to restore the basin, Victoria Quays, as a place to live and work. And this building is a great example of that. So upstairs you've got people living in apartments. We're going to go and have a look in one in a minute, and see some interesting artifacts that are in that flat. And then the ground floor of the two warehouses are workspaces, and they're probably among the most interesting workspaces you can imagine. So let's go in and meet Mr. David Baldwin, who works in this place and owns it. So David, how do you come to be conducting your business in a Georgian canal warehouse?
Well, we did a project for a company called Born and Raised a few years ago. While we were doing the project, we noticed that these two warehouses were still empty. So I made inquiries at Lambert Smithhampton and proceeded to buy them as soon as I could, really. So fell in love with the place really straight away. Fantastic being near the canal and the waterways, and just these buildings intrigued me. The fact that they'd been empty for so long, and they hadn't found an owner for all those years. I think it was last used in the 50s as a post office distribution facility, and before then, I'm not actually quite sure. I think it was certainly early 1900s.
So tell us about your boat, because not many offices have a boat parked in the middle of it.
No, the barge, it's looking a little bit dirty and unkept at the moment, but she's a 60 foot by 12 foot canal barge, a wide beam, made in Liverpool by Collingwood, and we bought as a completed hull, and then we had new concept boats fit her out in accordance with our designs and specification. And then right at the very end of the project, we had a choice of engines, and we decided to go to the full electric route, which kind of ticks all the green boxes. So there's no diesel on board, there's no fuel on board, and it just kind of enhances the experience of the tranquility of using the canal system.
And it does have a function for you in the office. You use it as an office space, do you?
Yeah, sure. We've, we depending, obviously, COVID's not been easy, but previous to that, we've generally have client meetings on board, presentations, and then if all goes well, clients become friends, and then we go on a little cruise down canal, partake in a couple of glasses to celebrate, hopefully, the deal, and that everybody absolutely loves the experience. Yeah, just being on the waterway is fantastic.
How do people feel working in this space?
I think most days are a pleasure to come to work, if I'm honest. Most evenings we have to kick people out at an appropriate time, which is true, and everyone has a really early start actually. So we kind of operate sort of 7 till 5, but 5's late enough, I think.
So that's quite a compliment for the reuse of old buildings.
Yeah, absolutely. And the barge, because we looked into the history of the building, the Sheffield keels, the large 15-foot wide vessels would come into the building and be loaded back up after leaving the grain in the grain warehouse. So we just thought it would look very odd without a vessel inside the building, really.
And now we're going to go upstairs and have a look at the loading mechanism and how that worked back in Georgian times.
Fantastic. Enjoy.
So here we are in one of the top flats in the terminal warehouse. This one is Chris's flat, we're going to talk to in a minute. And we were wondering how the goods, the heavy barrels and boxes and crates were transported out of the keel boats down in the boat hole up to the different warehouse floors, and here you can see how, because behind me is a Georgian warehouse hauling machine, steam powered we think, that would have both hauled up goods from the boat hole and then also allowed them to be hoisted back down on the outside of the building into waiting carts and other vehicles. And when the terminal warehouse was converted into apartments back in the 1990s, this machinery was preserved and was built in, rather eccentrically has to be said, into people's flats. So we're going to ask Chris, who lives here, what it's like to live with a bit of Georgian industrial archaeology.
Yeah, it's a bit strange, and it's not always very convenient because that sort of space is lost, and the only way of getting into that, you've got to crawl under the wheel, but at the end of the day, it's a piece of history. And I mean, how they actually made this 200 years ago, God knows. All done by hand, no machinery, no power tools, no drills or anything like that in those days.
And it's certainly something to talk about, isn't it? I bet nobody comes to this flat without talking about this.
Oh yeah, yes, oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
And I think the belts on this would have gone the whole length of the building, wouldn't they? We can see the line shafting on the other end of the building.
More than me on that.
Yeah.
Song, but
Yeah. And I think there was one at either end. And how does it feel living in such a historic building?
A responsibility sometimes, but yeah, I've enjoyed living here. Been here 20 years now, so yeah.
And it has a feeling of spaciousness, even though you've got things in it that are kind of take up space. It does feel very spacious, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. Well, they were quite generously designed, I think, the apartments. They're giving us a fair bit of space, but that does take up a bit of room, obviously.
Yeah, yeah. And is it in your lease that you can't remove it?
I can't remove it,
No.
Definitely not. No. It's not mine, this.
Right.
I'm not sure whether it belongs to Canal and River Trust or something like that, but it's not mine.
You're just looking after it?
I can't do anything. Yeah, I'm just the custodian.
So here we are inside the grain warehouse, which is the premises now occupied by Born and Raised, a design company. But it was built as a general warehouse. The grain hoppers that you can see above me here were added on in 1925. And basically grain came up in the big keels up the canal, was hauled to the top of the building in a grain hoist on the outside, and then carts came in here and they were filled, or sacks were filled from these nozzles on the bottom of the hoppers. When the upstairs was turned into apartments, fortunately, because it's a listed building, they kept the bottom of the hoppers, and they've created this, what I think is an absolutely amazing space. It's almost church-like, the way the riveted hoppers create this roof shape. And at the same time, it looks like sort of early science fiction, like a Geiger drawing or something like that. And with the water and the brickwork, it makes an amazingly atmospheric space to work in, I think. And we're going to find out from Andy Weir what he and his colleagues think about working in it. So Andy, this space was empty for about 20 years.
Yeah.
What made you take it?
I think it was a bit of luck, really. You know, we acquired the space, I think it was 2015, I think it was, and we moved in about 4 or 5 months after that. Our business had grown over the previous 4 or 5 years, and we were looking to acquire our own space that could really be something that would represent us as a business and become a big part of our brand. And we kind of fell upon this place, really. I'd seen it had been for sale for some time. I think it had recently changed opportunity for use of ownership and shifted towards office space. So that all kind of happened at around about the right time for us. And as soon as we came into the building, it was all empty, actually. You know, the units next door that are now occupied, it was all empty. And you know, whilst it was just a big, pretty dark and dingy space, it was a huge opportunity. You know, the character in the building and you know, the history to the building was just, you know, we fell in love with it straight away.
So how does this space work for your business?
I think what we've managed to realise, with, of course, the help from David at OVO next door, who helped us kit out the place, is we've created a really unique space that we are massively proud of, that's a big part of our brand and our organisation, but really captures who we are as a business and you know, it really assists that culture and that atmosphere that makes us a strong business. And then, you know, it's a space that we're proud of. It's a big part of our story to our clients and our customers. And most importantly, it's a big part of the story to our people. You know, this is a place where people want to work because, you know, we're good at what we do and we have a good reputation, but we've got a really great, unique space as well in a really interesting part of town. So it's quite a long answer to your question, but I think it was just timing. Yes. And when I admit when it had been empty for so long, I was like, well, why has nobody else done this? Yeah. Equally, it presented an opportunity, you know, a commercial opportunity for us actually to kind of go, you know, to be brave and go, well, let's do this because this is right for us. And since then, yeah, you know, all units along the bottom have been acquired and developed, and it's a really thriving bit of Sheffield. Yeah. No, it is. I think we're very, very, very lucky to have it, and the leaks aside, which any building has, you know, it is a wonderful space, and we love being part of it. And I think, you know, when we've spent time talking, Simon, and particularly last year at the Heritage Open Days, and just learning more and more about the history of the place, yeah, it just gets better, and we're very proud of it. So, and
hopefully, you know, it's a bit more visible.
Definitely, yeah, and that space there has just it's a shame the city centre hasn't quite got back to normal, you know, since the obviously the COVID pandemic. But I think as it begins to do so, I think it will really, you know, connect the two areas, because it's much better. Yes. Yeah, feel even prouder of the space. It's great.